Whenever a tourist comes to New York City, they come to see the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, Times Square, Central Park, and Grand Central. While I do believe that these are pretty touristy and are honestly pretty overrated, these places are touristy for a reason. The Empire State Building showed the old vision of New York City, where despite a depression, New York City was able to complete the tallest building in the world in just over a year. Times Square demonstrates the city that never sleeps, where billboards blare announcements 24/7. And Grand Central Station shows the old days of American rail travel, where one can hop onto a train bound to New York City and arrive into a glamorous train station. Today, we will talk about the main railroad that operates inside Grand Central Terminal, Metro North. The Metro North Railroad is actually bigger than the LIRR, at 787 miles compared to the 700-mile length of the LIRR. However, the LIRR carries more commuters than the Metro North Railroad, at 276,000 per weekday versus 212,000 per weekday, respectively. But Metro North is more popular than all of the other rail agencies, at a whopping 86% approval rating. For reference, the LIRR stands at 70%, and the New York City subway stands at 52%. But anyway, that is just some stats of the Metro North Railroad. What is the history behind it? Well, Metro North we know today was actually multiple railroads. East of the Hudson, half of the tracks belong to the New York Central Railroad. That railroad itself was formed from many railroads, like the New York and Harlem Railroad and the Boston and Albany Railroad. Another railroad called the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad owned that other half of the tracks, which itself was also formed from many railroads, like the New York and New Haven Railroad and the New Haven and Hartford Railroad. West of the Hudson, the lines that Metro North operates today belong to the Erie Railroad, though that company itself went through several changes. Things changed after World War II. Because of cars, the railroads struggled to be in business. This led to even more consolidation, but even this was not enough. In 1968, Penn Central was formed to take over the Pennsylvania, New York Central, and New York, New Haven, and Hartford railroads, though the latter came later. But within 2 years, Penn Central filed for bankruptcy. This was when the earliest form of Metro North came, when the newly formed MTA agreed to subsidize operations on the Hudson, Harlem, and New Haven lines, the backbone of today's Metro North system. After that process, the government became interested in owning these three lines, and by 1972, the government owned all three. However, Penn Central still continued to operate these railroads. But even Penn Central cannot last forever. In 1976, operation of Penn Central was transferred to Conrail, a national railroad company created by the federal government. Later, the Erie, now Erie-Lackawanna, was also absorbed into Conrail. But Conrail, just like its predecessors, was still struggling. So in 1981, Reagan's administration decided it would be best to put the railroads in the hands of the states. That became the basis of the Northeast Rail Service Act, which spurred the MTA and the Connecticut DOT to take over operations on the Harlem, New Haven, and Hudson lines in 1983. And that was when the Metro North Commuter Railroad was formed. Now that we got some history out of the way, let's talk about the infrastructure. There are two main sections of Metro North, the section west of the Hudson River and the section east of the Hudson River. The section west of the Hudson feeds into Hoboken, while the section east of the Hudson feeds into Grand Central. These two sections are disconnected from one another, as Metro North does not run trains between these two sections. But anyways, just like the LIRR video, I will go by the physical infrastructure rather than the service. For example, even though New Haven trains operate this section, I will refer to the New Haven section as this, as the New Haven line starts after Woodlawn. Let's start with the lines east of the Hudson River. Our first line is the Park Avenue Main Line. The Park Avenue Main Line starts at Grand Central and runs north. It crosses the Hudson River and ends at Mott Haven Junction. There are only 2 stops here, but there used to be more. But those stops were closed sometime in the early 1900s. This line is useful if you're going to Midtown or Harlem. At Mott Haven Junction, the main line splits into 2 lines. The first one is the Hudson Line, a 68-mile, 28-station line that runs to Poughkeepsie. And just like its name implies, this line runs along the coast of the Hudson River and also shares tracks with Amtrak. What is interesting is that there are provisions on the current Tappan Zee Bridge to extend Hudson Line service over to the other side of the Hudson. While a study is needed to prove its feasibility, I am interested in this idea, as the Tappan Zee Bridge is often choked by traffic. This line is useful if you're going to Yonkers, Beacon, or Poughkeepsie. The other line that splits at Mott Haven Junction is the Harlem Line. The Harlem Line is a 77-mile, 36-station line and starts in the South Bronx before running north, serving a large portion of Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess County, before ending at Wassaic. But given the long length of this line, some trains short turn at Southeast Station, as that is where the electrified service ends. This line is useful if you're going to Fordham, Scarsdale, White Plains, or Bedford Hills. My next line is the New Haven Line. The New Haven Line is a 61-mile, 29-station line that begins as a branch of the Harlem Line. The line turns east, running along the coast of the Long Island Sound. It then enters Connecticut and runs all the way to New Haven. This line, for the most part, shares tracks with Amtrak, as Amtrak services continue all the way to Boston. This service is useful if you're going to New Rochelle, Stamford, or Bridgeport. The New Haven Line also has 3 additional branches. The first branch is the New Canaan Branch, an 8-mile, 4-station branch line. This line branches off of the New Haven Line at Stamford and runs to New Canaan on mostly single track. The New Canaan Branch was just recently renovated, with positive train control installed in 2019 and with new track installed in 2023. With this, speeds can increase from 30 miles per hour to 50 miles per hour. This branch is useful if you're going to Glenbrook or Springdale. The second branch is the Danbury Branch, a 24-mile, 7-station branch line. This line branches at South Norwalk and heads north to Danbury. This line is useful if you're going to Cannondale or Reading. The final branch is the Waterbury Branch, a 29-mile, 6-station branch line. This line branches at Stratford and again heads north to Waterbury. This line is useful if you're going to Ansonia or Beacon Falls. Now that we talked about lines east of the Hudson, let's talk about the lines that go west of the Hudson. The first one is the Port Jervis Line. It starts in Port Jervis. It makes this insane U-shape. It then exits New York at around Suffern Station and enters tracks belonging to New Jersey Transit and travels on either the New Jersey Transit Main Line or the New Jersey Transit Bergen County Line. It ends at Hoboken, but commuters heading into Manhattan can transfer at Secaucus Junction for a New Jersey Transit train heading to Penn Station, or at Hoboken for a PATH train heading to World Trade Center or Midtown. This line is useful if you're going to Suffern or Otisville. The next and final line is the Pascagoula Valley Line. This line starts at Spring Valley and runs to Pearl River, where it exits New York and enters New Jersey. It then runs all the way to Hoboken, where just like the Port Jervis Line, one can transfer at Secaucus Junction or Hoboken for Manhattan-bound services. This line is useful if you're going to Spring Valley. What is interesting is that all but 2 lines of Metro North have portions that are next to an expressway or a parkway. For example, much of the New Haven Line is paralleled by the I-95, while the Harlem Line is paralleled by multiple parkways. It seems like terrible urbanism works the other way, where unlike highway median stations, where the train line comes with the highway, the train line provides a nice right-of-way to build a highway. Now that we talked about the active lines, let's talk about the abandoned branches. Let's start with the Port Morris Branch. This branch off of today's Harlem Line and traveled diagonally in a tunnel and open cut all the way to around East 143rd Street on a 6 line. It opened in 1842 and was not only used for passenger service, but also a link to the Oak Point Yard. Over time, when train cars became much longer, the sharp curves in the branch became unsuitable. The final nail in the coffin came in 1998, when the Oak Point Link opened, which linked the Oak Point Yard on a much straighter track. The Port Morris branch ceased service in 1993 and was abandoned in 2003. Over time, the branch fell into disuse, as water and trash would collect into the open cut. It became such a problem that it was called the Mott Haven Swamp. But in 2014 to 2015, the branch was cleaned up, and two groups proposed different ideas for the future of this branch. The first idea was to turn this into a park, while the second idea was to reactivate rail so that it can be part of the Triborough RX, the predecessor to the IBX. And if you're getting deja vu, that is because something very similar has happened in Queens. No way with Queensway. For now, I am leaning towards rail reactivation, though I would need to see a study on that. For now, enjoy the fact that rail reactivation is made 10 times harder because there is development built on its right-of-way. Our next abandoned rail line is the Putnam Division. This line branched off the Hudson Line at around University Heights, and would run all the way to either Mahopac Mines or Brewster Station, where it would connect with the Harlem Line or a whole slew of other railroads. This line ended service in 1958, though freight service continued until 1989. Today, the Putnam Division is now a rail trail that follows two major highways, which again is pretty common for Metro North. Our final abandoned line is the Beacon Line. Well, I lied. It is active, but is only used for freight. This line starts at Beacon on the Hudson Line and runs southeast all the way to, Southeast Station on the Harlem Line, before continuing to Connecticut. But this time is called the Maybrook branch. Because of its circumferential nature, there are studies to see whether reactivating the line would be worth it. We will have to wait to see for its verdict. Now that we talked about tracks, let's talk about some stations. Again, there are the usual stations like Grand Central, but there are other notable stations. Starting with our first one, Port Jervis. Well, not this one, but this one. This station was built in a Victorian-style architecture and was the busiest station for a while thanks to its location on the borders of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. But because of cars, the station saw less use and subsequently declined. When Metro North took over the Erie Railroad, they opted to build a smaller replacement station. Eventually, after the station was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1980, the original station was renovated and is now home to shops and medical offices. The next one is Poughkeepsie. We all know about the grandeur of Grand Central, but did you know that there was a mini version of that? Enter Poughkeepsie Station, where multiple elements of the station were copied from Grand Central, like the waiting room. However, just like Port Jervis, it faced a decline. Then it was renovated. But unlike Port Jervis, the station house is still used for Metro North and Amtrak, so that is nice. Our final station is an oddball. It is the Appalachian Trail Station. Located on the Harlem Line, it is a very minimalist station. Like, it isn't even a high-floor platform, though I guess a full station isn't really needed here, as the station is only in use for weekends and holidays. And a final fact to wrap up this oddball station is that this is one of the newer stations on the network, which opened on April Fool's Day of 1990. Now that we talked about the past, let's talk about the future. Right now, because of East Side Access, there is some capacity at Penn Station. This is where the Penn Access project comes in, where New Haven trains can continue with Amtrak services over the Hellgate Bridge to Penn Station. Along the way, there are 4 new stations, though I do think a 5th one at Broadway in Queens should be considered. This is because of the connections to QBL, where riders can access a large portion of Queens via a transfer or two. But anyway, this project is currently under construction and is set to be open in 2027. There's also talk about bringing Hudson Line trains down to Penn Station via Amtrak's Empire Connection. The problem is that the Hudson Line is electrified, but the Empire Connection isn't. So work needs to be done to electrify the Empire Connection. Metro North would also need to build trains that work with different types of third rail found at Penn Station. But I am curious to see what will happen in the future, as Metro North is pretty interested in the project. Because of Penn Station Access and the Gateway project, there are proposals to through-run some trains. One such proposal is from the Effective Transit Alliance, where the New Haven line would be combined with the Port Washington branch of the LIRR, which would be through-run to New Jersey Transit. If you're interested, the study is in the description. Link below if you'd like to read it. All in all, Metro North, just like the LIRR, is a very extensive system, with a complicated history. This explainer just scratches the surface of what is actually there. If there are any Metro North rail fanners that would want to add more, please do so in the comments below. And with that, this marks the end of this video. If you like this video, consider liking and subscribing. and I'll see you in the next video.